good for another week.
Well, welcome you all to the Middleton City Hall. It's 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call the meeting of the Middleton Plan Commission for October 9th, 2018 to order. And the first item on the agenda is the roll call.
Paulson. Here.
Hubbard? Here.
Farrar.
Yeah,
Ramsey.
Here.
Murray.
Here.
Reed.
Yeah.
And Ferdehurt is not present tonight, so 6 are present.
all right. So the next is the approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. The next item is the sign design review for Goodwill, 6280 Century Avenue. Mark, you are taking it?
As you all know, this is the site of the former grocery store. The building has been, is currently being reconstructed. A portion of it was retained, and most of the building is new. And those plans were previously approved, but what's still outstanding is the sign package. So what's before you tonight is the request for a 25 square foot monument sign, which I'll have some discussion about in a moment. The facade sign, the primary sign is, there's the monument sign right there, thank you. The facade sign is 65 square feet over the main entrance. And then there's a secondary sign that reads donations to the north or southeast end of the building, so the eastern end of the building. As I noted in my staff comments, the signs are entirely compliant with our sign code, and I would recommend approval of the 3 signs in the landscaping plan, but it's been brought to my attention, Sean Stowski this afternoon brought to my attention a concern regarding the monument sign in the red circle here. And Abby, I have another PDF downloaded there if you, if you can open, there's 2 of them actually. Yeah, the PDF, right? Yep.
The other PDF?
Yep, there's 2 of them there. There's that one. So if you look at the, it's a little hard to tell, but you see where, in the middle of the screen it says hydrant, existing hydrant, you see that?
Mm-hmm.
If you go southwest of that, you can start seeing the word SAN. My point is there's a lot of utility easements running through here. And that was not shown on the site plan for the sign, which is not that big a deal, but fortunately Sean Stowski looked into this and brought this up to us, raised this concern to me.
So in relation to all these utilities, where's the sign?
Yeah, it's hard to tell here. This is an existing drawing. I'm sorry, you're supposed to, we should be on page 2. I don't know how this got back to page 1. I had it set on page 2. There we go, now scroll down. Wondered why that was so hard to see. A little further. There we go, that's much better. Thank you. This is the drawing. So the green box shows the green rectangle shows the sign location, and 18 feet is the I think that was the sanitary sewer, and then there's another easement. So Sean's concern was that the sign not be placed where it would be over one of these utility lines. So I brought this up to Kristen from Grant Signs, and they have identified a second option. If you can go to the other PDF, please. And that's to have it in the southwest corner where there's more room to have it be, for the sign to be located farther away from the easement area. Now, my recommendation, that revised recommendation, is that if there's a way for the sign to be installed in the original location that's to the city engineer's satisfaction, that would still be my recommendation, but if not, then to ask for your support to locate it in the secondary location, the western location. So that would be our revised staff recommendation. That makes sense?
Okay,
Let's suppose they put it in the first location, and it's over an easement for utilities. If they have to do repair on the utilities, presumably whoever goes in to repair that just knocks down the sign, and it's the cost of Goodwill to have to replace it, right? Same as if you
Unless
accidentally.
they replace it by Goodwill. Yeah.
Unless, it's the same as if you happen to put a mailbox or something over a utility easement in your own property, is,
Yeah.
as long as you recognize what you're doing,
Right.
it's not gonna,
We could do we could have a license agreement. The point is, I wasn't able to discuss these options with Sean after he sent his email because he had left. So this came late in the day today. So I am asking for your, any motion to approve the sign package to provide the flexibility for staff to resolve the final placement of the monument sign.
is the applicant here? So, I mean, how important is it to you to have it
You want to come to the,
in the original location?
It is important to Goodwill, just to direct traffic a little bit more, especially being that the donations is on that side and on that elevation of the building. However, they're open to having it on the west elevation, just so that the sign gets approved, but they would prefer the original location.
And Sean's concern is that it's just on top of the utilities. It doesn't impact those utilities. It's just if they have to
There's
be
the
repaired.
potential, yeah, and Sean is, he plays that role a lot, where he looks at
Yeah.
potential obstacles.
So from the sign perspective, Goodwill's perspective, if they had to put it in the original, if they put it in the original spot and it had to be removed and then replaced, is that a huge issue?
No, Goodwill will take full responsibility for that.
And can we make that a condition of the?
Yes.
Any approval?
Yes, that's where I was going with this, to give us
Just a
the
minute.
discretion
That's
to work that
typical.
out, whether it's through a
Yeah.
license agreement. The other thing Kirsten said to me earlier when we talked about this was, the sign base only occupies 16, did you say 16 inches?
Yeah, about 16 inches. It's a concrete caisson, so, I mean, and we'll call diggers, of course, before we do any type of foundation. It's not a spread foundation, so there's minimal actual concrete that's going into the ground itself.
Susan, you have a question?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, microphone.
In my district, and for anyone driving on Century, you're gonna see, coming from the east, you're gonna see it much better at the original location than moving it further west. And coming west, you'll still see it probably in adequate time, if it's actually better, if it's at that east location. I
Yeah.
mean, it's right up against conservancy lands, so in terms of for Goodwill, the best location is that original one.
Okay, thank you, Susan. So as long as they know, Goodwill knows what they're doing, and if they need to change it, and I guess you probably will be okay, right? So you will talk to Sean then?
So the motion would be then to, right, we could make a motion to approve, allowing, now I've got Reed's coughing,
Giving staff the flexibility.
giving staff the flexibility to put it on the western side if,
Hmm.
subject to engineer.
If the eastern
approval.
side doesn't work, so.
Licensing agreement that if it needs to be taken down, then they'll pay for it.
Is that the motion then?
That would be my motion, yeah.
And it's to approve the entire sign package with
To
that.
approve the sign package, yes.
Okay,
And,
need a-
and are we also approving the landscaping plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
on the base of the sign.
Which, around the base of the sign, not the landscaping plan for the whole site, that's already been approved.
Correct.
Yep.
Can I question the landscaping plan? for-
Need a
around the
second on this one. Did somebody, okay, all right, yes, David.
Can it not just move up on the drawing? So you've got 8'4" from the property sign edge. Can it not be 12 inches? 12 feet, I mean?
There are a couple of utilities. We can go back to the other PDF. Might be a little bit easier to view. Have this one as well. It might be a little bit easier to see for you to view. But you can kind of see the orange. That's the sanitary. Then there's the sign itself. So we've looked at a
So
couple of
it does,
options.
okay. Yeah, all right.
I'm sorry I didn't bring this up sooner. Sean was out of the office last week, so.
That's fine.
I can see why it would be better where the first location.
Yep, The other one is more like a afterthought.
Yes,
Building's coming along and looks good.
it does, yeah.
Well, you know the risk, so, you know, it may never happen, but if it happens, you're going to, will have to bear the cost, so.
Mhm. Goodwill understands that.
Okay, any more questions, David?
No.
Jennifer? Everybody happy? Okay, so the motion is approve the sign for Goodwill 6280 Century Avenue with revision providing, well, as the motion made by Kurt, so with giving flexibility to the staff and
Can we
having
just-
license.
Can we just clarify what Kurt just said? That the landscape plan is related to the sign, not to the landscape plan.
Yeah, because the other landscape plan we already approved, so this landscape is just around the sign. And that's part of the motion as well, so. Okay, then that's the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. All right. Now on to the next one. Item number 3, set a public hearing for sign variance for State Bank of Cross Plains, 8301 University Avenue.
You don't see these sort of things too often, just a little bit of background. Very rarely, it seems, certainly not every year, we have a request for a sign variance. What that means is if a business that's not located in a planned development district wishes to put up signs that don't follow the letter of the law with the sign code, then they need to obtain a variance, which is a public hearing process, which is why we're scheduling a public hearing for this applicant.
So I'll move that we schedule a public hearing for October 23rd at 7:05.
Need a second? Any questions or comments? Otherwise, all those in favor of the motion to set up the public hearing on October 23rd, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? So the motion passed unanimously. Okay, guys, go and celebrate. All right, now we are on to the comprehensive plan update and discussion.
Abby has distributed at your place, and by email, actually, it's not at your place, or is, yeah, it is at your place.
Yeah, it is, yes.
Thank you, Abby, and also emailed this afternoon,
Thank
her revisions to the economic development chapter, and then also in your packet is a summary of the public comments that we received when we held a variety of public input sessions a few years ago. Draft of the plan. Abby, do you wanna just
Yep.
walk through that?
So I just want to first of all issue an apology if anybody had like gone through and like redlined the other version that was in there. I hope nobody did that. I didn't anticipate that happening, but when I went back and read what was put together with the Plan Commission agenda, I realized that that might have been the case, so I'm sorry if I wasted anyone's time. So I emailed out a very redlined copy, and then I printed a redlined copy, and I can also print a clean copy and send a clean copy if it would be helpful. This is just specifically the economic development chapter. I just kind of wanted to go over some of the highlights and get your thoughts on where we're going with this before we get too far into actually formatting and getting all of the data included in this draft. So, to start out with, we had public input sessions, and we got some information on what people wanted in terms of economic development. And I would hope that, you know, as this moves forward, we will have more robust discussions specifically. But some of the feedback that we got from residents was that a negative was that the city of Middleton's downtown has limited growth capacity, but also a conflicting comment to keep developing downtown. There was a comment related to wanting more local breweries. There was a comment about there were actually a few comments about needing more commercial land for commercial development, and needing a plan and also a map that shows opportunities for infill development in the city. Which I agree with, because we get a lot of requests for meetings from developers who are looking for land, and we're constantly like kind of going through and having the same meeting where we're saying this is, you know, these are the opportunities that we have available. And we do have some maps like that within our, both of our TIF projects plans that we can kind of pull together and include in the economic development chapter, and of course it would be something that we would have to continually update as well. There were 3 comments that we heard in the public input sessions that came up time and time again, and I included them here, but they kind of go across all the chapters of the comp plan. That was that the city needs more affordable housing, that residents wanted sustainability included throughout the comp plan, and that we wanted to increase diversity in the city and make sure that we're being sensitive to a diverse range of needs in our planning for the city. And the photo on this slide is from one of the public input sessions that we held, and I really like it because you can see that one of the people put a Post-it note on there that said "No love for Cross Plains." I don't know what that meant, but I just thought it was funny. So I
Love for
included that. No love for Cross Plains. We
Well,
do
that was at
have,
the high
we do
school.
have, we do have love for Cross Plains.
We love Cross.
Yeah.
It was a complaint, it was a dislike about Middleton.
Yeah, I think there was a,
Middleton
there was
doesn't
a,
love them.
yeah, exactly.
Clarify
To clarify. We did look at a couple other communities' comprehensive plans, and if you have examples of other comp plans in cities that you want us to take a look at for inspiration, we would be happy to do that. But in terms of the economic development chapter, we looked at Eau Claire and Fitchburg, primarily because I know the planners in both of those communities, and I know especially Eau Claire has done a really nice job on their comprehensive plan, and they've done a lot in terms of sustainability planning, which came up, like I mentioned, several times in the public input. So Eau Claire took an interesting approach to their economic development chapter. They had one goal, and the goal was to increase household income, job opportunities, and business growth throughout the local community. And then in order to meet that goal, they had 10 specific objectives, and then they listed policies under each of the 10 objectives. And then I took a look at Fitchburg's plan as well, and their economic development chapter is pretty lean because they were actually working on forward Fitchburg place-based economic development vision and strategy at the time that they were adopting the comprehensive plan. So they kind of referred to that process, and that plan includes a lot of the details for what they want to see in terms of economic development in their community. The way that our section is structured currently, and this mirrors exactly like how we had it with the 2006 plan, it starts talking about the state requirements for the Smart Growth Comprehensive Planning Law, and then we go over a background of economic development in our community. We identify community assets and weaknesses, and then we kind of survey the existing programs and initiatives that exist in the community. For example, both of the TIF districts that we have, the Middleton Area Development Corporation, which we of course work very closely with, the Chamber of Commerce programs, Tourism Commission, Community Development Authority, and other initiatives and programs that exist now in our city and in our region for economic development. But the meat of the chapter is in the goals as well as the objectives and policies. So the way that our plan is written now is broad goal and then the objectives and policies together listed beneath the goals, basically showing a roadmap for how we're going to reach our goals. So in the economic development chapter, we include some data. It is not all in the draft now. We have it all compiled, but we haven't copied and pasted all of our tables into the draft. We would kind of look at that when we're actually ready to format and put everything together. But the data that we have included now is information on Middleton's top 10 employers, information from our finance department on the city's tax valuation. We have quite a bit of census data, economic characteristics, and businesses by industry type. And the question that I would put out to you guys is, are there other data points that you would recommend we put together and include in the plan? So that's one question. And then I want to go over sort of how we've consolidated the goals. I don't want to take the time tonight to go over all of the objectives, but I'm hoping we can get to a point soon where we can all agree on the goals that we've included here. And Mark sat down with me and we kind of ignored everything that we had in the last draft, because it is now a few years old, admittedly. So we kind of tried to start from scratch here. And we've identified 7 goals. I don't know if I need to actually read them all for you here, but you can see we have goals about public infrastructure, environmental sustainability. Again, that came out very strongly in the public comment sessions that we had. Protecting and enhancing the downtown. We have one related to workforce housing, and of course, we have a separate chapter of the comprehensive plan that spells out more details about the city's workforce housing strategy. And then we have a goal about supporting a diverse economy that includes a range of high-quality job types. We want to ensure that as growth occurs in the city, that there are adequate sites for business development. So that kind of gets back to the comments that we heard about lack of land available for commercial development. And then we want to foster entrepreneurship, business retention, and growth of Middleton businesses through targeted programs. And of those 7 goals, the only one that was retained from the previous draft is, word for word, is the one related to fostering entrepreneurship. So that's all I have for you for the update tonight, but I'm happy to get any comments that you have and take them back and revise the draft.
So Abby, who do you think uses this comp plan the most? The developers or, how do you use it?
I don't think that the average resident would be likely to go online and read the whole comp plan for the city. But I do think that somebody who's looking at making an investment in the community would be likely to go and review the comp plan and kind of look at the direction the city's going, see where the priorities are. And then I think the average resident might find use in a specific chapter. If they're looking to buy a home, they might want to find out what the city's goals are for housing. If they ride Metro bus transit, they may want to find out, what are the city's goals for expanding transit? Where does the city plan to go? Yeah, go ahead,
And
Mark.
importantly, the city's decisions with respect, for example, for rezoning requests, conditional use permits, are supposed to be
Yeah.
linked to the comprehensive plan. So
Consistent
we adopt-
with.
Consistent with, right, the comprehensive plan. So that's really a very important part of the reason why we have the plan, why it's mandated at the state level now to update our plan every 10 years.
Right, and as Susan mentioned, the city council, it does include a lot of goals and objectives, and we want to make sure that the council buys into the direction that we're recommending we go.
And then when council approves this and it's the policy agenda of the city, then it's always been helpful when staff is reviewing projects or development proposals to list the parts of the comprehensive plan it's consistent with and how it fits into the overall vision, so.
Other questions for Abby?
I have a comment, and it relates to sort of data-driven decision-making. So there are some things here that are listed with tourism, and you had asked specifically about maybe other data elements to include. I'm wondering if you may have access to some of the numbers of visitors per year, or the opportunities that Middleton has provided for economic development in, that are in a quantitative sense that you could list out. That might help then encourage certain goals or ways of meeting the goals that we've got. that we haven't thought of before, just based on trying to understand what types of numbers we're talking about. So one area I would look at that would be in the tourism area, if there are certain types of things that are attracting more visitors or not, you know, it might be good to kind of discuss that a little bit. The other part that I think is important here is there's different areas that we've talked about before in terms of Middleton's businesses and the development patterns in the city. And on page 8, there's the map of the urban greenway economic development opportunity. That's a very good example of one area of the city where there is sort of this plan and there's opportunities that are listed out. I'm wondering if, you know, on the Parmenter corridor, there's things that you might want to point out or refer to. Things that have happened in downtown in the last couple of years that are generating growth and economic development. And then maybe, you know, near where Goodwill is going in different areas of town there, these are sort of pockets. And of course, the industrial area, what about just-in-time manufacturing and shipping and all of our sort of focused technology, biotechnology kind of things that are going on? Those are generators that are occurring in our community, and so maybe knowing something more about what they are, what kinds of numbers we're talking about will help people realize the economic benefits they're really adding.
Great comments. To start off with, you talked about tourism, and I know tourism is in the process of doing an economic impact study now. I don't know if we have their numbers yet, but I can see what I can get from our tourism director to pull into that. Tourism is also in the process of doing some strategic planning, and I was actually in one of their strategic planning sessions yesterday morning for 5 hours. So they're bringing in all different people from different aspects of tourism, downtown Middleton, to help guide them with a new mission and vision for what they want to do with their department. So I'll try to pull some of that information into the tourism section. I think that's a really good idea. And then in terms of the other plans you mentioned, so you talked about like we referred a little bit to the urban greenway study, but I think we could include like a better summary of that, and then we would also include the plan as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. I'll do the same for the Parmenter corridor neighborhood plan, and then I'll maybe see if I can work with the chamber to get some additional data on like manufacturing and industrial and some of the other things that you mentioned, and then do a summary of the downtown too. Good ideas.
Other questions? David?
From Jan's comments, I think sometimes it's useful to work backwards. And I'm wondering if there are physical changes, that might be economic development changes, but physical changes in the downtown area, say, that you want to make sure is initiated further back in the goals, right? I mean, it strikes me that one thing that if the mayor didn't want to get elected next time, we could say that Euclid Avenue,
that's
wrong
Cleveland.
one, that University Avenue between Park and the downtown should be developed for commercial. It all backs onto residential streets and it's residential units right now, so there'd be an uproar over it. But I'm just wondering if there are physical things that you thinking about wanting to get into the plan. You need to make sure there are the goals and then the policies to support it right at this early stage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, we had that build plan a while ago, and I guess we do need to do something about it. So. Good idea, David, good idea.
I guess building on those comments, I'm kind of looking at this and going, how many goals do we need? And as I read the goals, I start to formulate a vision in my own mind as to where we think Middleton's going. But is there a vision statement somewhere?
I missed the
Overall
last plan
vision
commission meeting, but I think from what I heard from Mark and Eileen, there were a lot of conversations about needing to start out in the introduction section with a really nice vision statement for overall what we wanted to see in the comp plan. And I think that the plan is to draft something, but we haven't done that yet.
Because everything is related to everything else. I mean,
Yeah.
you build on each other. I mean, and I don't know if you, work from the inside out or from the outside in. You know, vision, goal, objectives, how many goals do we really need, and what's the difference between a goal, a vision, and an objectives? You know, we can have that whole
We
semantic
can have Kurt
discussion
give us a comp plan
the whole
101.
time, but, you know, it's kinda, objectives to me are more like an action, you know, this is an action we're gonna take, you know, and a goal, and that action is towards that goal, blah, blah, blah. And the goals obviously, reflect what the vision is, but, you know, I can read these and come up with my own vision, but I'm not sure that that's the city's vision.
Right.
I do wonder how many goals one has before they become watered down or somewhat meaningless. You know, I don't disagree with any goal that you folks have put together here. It's just, okay, how do they relate to each other? How do they compete with each other? Where does the economics go for each goal? I mean, you know, if we're gonna accomplish all these goals, they're all gonna take resources, and do we have that kind of resource to make this really happen? Or is this an exercise to meet a state requirement? That, you know, that's, I guess I said what I need to say, I mean.
Well, that's, talking about vision here, so the two Americans, they won the Nobel Prize in economics today. And one of the big things which they did was the innovation, whether at the government level or, at the city level, but, or at the whole world level. So this is Romer, 62.
yeah.
Who studied why some economies grow faster than the others, has produced research that shows how governments can advance innovation. So, planning document, that's where the innovation comes as well. And then the other one was the Nobel Prize, the second one was Nordhaus. And he was the one who pushed for the carbon tax. Yeah. So again, innovations, so look at this, this is an opportunity here when you are preparing this, this document. And I don't know if I saw the entrepreneurship, but if have seen the word innovation in there, not just putting the word in there, but actually fostering innovation is pretty important. The cities or the countries which grow and are innovative, so.
So one way we could do that is, there's a vision statement for the city overall, which has these sort of elements, but a separate vision for economic development, which would focus on sustainability and kind of innovation and leveraging our proximity. I mean, our two greatest assets are that we're part of a region that has the university and state government and bio and healthcare and all those. I mean, that's the competitive advantage of the region. So that kind of innovation built, and then the other is, of course, our locational, the highways, and we're close to Madison and good quality of life, so you could do that. I was gonna ask, just kind of following up with what Reed and the others were saying, is one way we could do this is help our citizens understand, show the job growth in the city over time. And then show kind of a forecast 20 years out of, could either be a goal-based forecast, this is the number of jobs we want, or it could kind of trend, we project the trend, and then work backwards from that, which just says if we, because we're currently at about 17,000 jobs in the city.
Well, the latest I saw was 23. That's an estimate, and you wonder that.
Population.
No, 23,000 jobs. So you have to.
Right.
Population is 20,000.
Right.
So you actually, that's a good point. You have
Right.
to ask
Well,
that.
project out, because if we then say, okay, in 10 years, is it reasonable to say we'll have 25,000 jobs? Then you work backward in that, in some planning, to say, okay, how much square foot do you need per employee plus parking, and that's this many square feet of development capacity, and do we have that? And show where it is on the land use map. Otherwise, we say, well, okay, right, because in here we say we want to make sure that there's business development in the north side. But it'd be kind of helpful to show or say where might that be, or what might that look like? Are we really envisioning like another large industrial park area, or kind of small scale businesses integrated into neighborhoods? Because those are different types of employment-based land uses. So
And also,
I mean, we don't have to get that specific, but it might be useful to kind of do that kind of scenario that says, how much capacity do we have actually to accommodate additional employment without looking at either additional land or changing some land to commercial rather than residential?
and also
Right.
the question to ask is, do we want more jobs, and what
Right.
kind of a jobs?
Well,
And,
so-
And jobs for everyone,
yeah,
not just one economic
Class, right?
class, exactly.
yeah.
I mean, it says in here that we want to support adequate sites for business development, but it'd be helpful to know what is adequate? What does that mean? And I guess, sorry to add another goal, since, right, is a goal which is really to celebrate our position in a region as part of, right, collaborating with the region, with MadRep. And so an objective there would be, I would like to see an objective that says we don't try to poach businesses from other cities in our region, right? That it's really the Madison region that's competing against Idaho or Stuttgart or Florida, right? It shouldn't be Middleton competing against Fitchburg.
No, no.
That we should have a policy or something that says we're not gonna poach.
I think there
Right.
is. There is.
Right. I mean, in the same way that, I always ask that question when we have TIF. If someone can't expand their business in their city and they wanna move here, then that might be a good use for TIF. But too many cities in this state are using TIF to just kind of poach someone else's businesses, and
No,
that's wrong.
And that's wrong. Yes, Susan, you have a,
I think you're getting at something I wanted to bring up, is the concept of sustainability, but environmental protections for, we've got some incredibly valuable farmland just north of the airport that we so far have been really good at protecting. And I would suggest, Abby, if you would contact Joe Handelsman, who's director of Wisconsin Institute for Discovery. She can give you the information as to how valuable it is in relation to the rest of the world. And, but I think we need to identify in this areas that we absolutely do not want to develop, such as that area, because of its value in terms of agriculture. And sort of following up on what Kurt was saying, certain areas where we could have industry or so on, but other areas that we truly want to protect. And in that same line, emphasize the importance of infill development. And this is a comments that I keep getting also at like the Lakes and Watershed Commission, with frustration of people in downtown Madison who don't like tall buildings but are fine with urban sprawl outside the city.
Well, they don't like tall buildings and they don't like urban sprawl.
Yeah,
That's-
but
that's
the
a
two,
contradiction.
but as you're growing, you've got to deal with one or the other, and this might be where we clearly explain to citizens the value of tall buildings in terms of preventing urban sprawl, taking over valuable agricultural lands, parklands, and so on.
A lot of this gets into the land use
Think
chapter.
That the-
that
Yeah,
have some of
right.
that in the land use
Right.
chapter,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Okay.
it's part of the overall vision of
Yeah,
compact.
but-
So if as a city, we're going to accommodate our projected growth in employment and households, we either accommodate that by growing up or growing out, right? I mean, that's the point, is the most environmentally sensitive, and most environmentally friendly policy we have is high-density urban infill development. But But that's part of the vision, right? Is
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
we say we don't want any more jobs.
Yeah, that,
And then we have run into problems with tax base and
no,
services.
Services,
I mean,
No,
we
but-
could, we could say we don't want any more jobs, we don't want any more housing. But it'd be nice to have a vision that says if we're gonna take more jobs, we should take more housing. I like that.
okay, Kurt,
But
Yeah.
yeah,
you know, you probably studied Cambridge. It's completely landlocked, right? Thank you, Susan.
Well,
So-
I've actually got one
so
more
it's,
thing.
City of
so-
Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, and quality of growth, and the.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, there are cities, they can have a quality of life and still, I don't know whether they're growing or not. I mean, at some stage, you know, I guess Middleton will be landlocked too, and there's another city, Wauwatosa, one of the mayors, and we were on the same panel, and they have been landlocked for a long time. So I think, you know, that's something which we have to start thinking, that at some stage in next 15, 20 years, we probably will reach there, so, and what do we want to do? So,
Even the city of Waukesha is considering growing up rather than out, which is,
Or Monona.
oh, Monona's landlocked
Monona's
anyway,
already
yeah.
landlocked. Monona has
You
problems.
had another,
Yeah, this is a real specific little detail, and it's probably more relevant to the University Avenue plan. But in terms of where we currently have businesses backing up against residential, when that's redeveloped, one of the most important things I think is to be sure whatever goes in there is something pleasant for the residences to look at. And this came up, what I'm most familiar with is the grocery store in Middleton Hills. The very first plan had the back of the grocery store backing up on Frank Lloyd Wright, and we were going to have tractor-trailer trucks going down Frank Lloyd Wright. It was horrible. And I sent an email to Mark about, this is not acceptable, and it got changed. And we've got what looks like a nice business area, and we don't look at the backs of businesses. I mean, I was looking at the back of Willie Street. I feel sorry for the people that live across the street from it, and it perfectly fits all the zoning regulations. But I think that's an important thing that needs to go in here, is that we protect, you know, what's already there in terms of residences, of what goes in the future, in terms of appearance, not necessarily use, but appearance.
yeah, that's a good point, Susan. So about the land close to the airport, that's already classified as, it can't be developed from the maps.
Well, it's,
Oh,
Yeah. It's in
have
the,
our-
pardon me?
As long as we have our agreement.
it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
agreement with the town of Springfield,
Yeah.
but
No,
that
that's
can
the town of
change.
Middleton, right?
What is around the airport?
Yeah, that's,
It's mostly town, we have an agreement with the town of Springfield. They border the airport.
Yeah,
There's
but-
also a little sliver of the town. of
And
Middleton.
that expires in 2029, right?
So in the life of the plan, we should talk about what the vision would be.
anyway, but I guess the bottom line is we
In our
want to preserve
ETC.
that land, so, yes, yes.
Well,
it's
and-
in our ETZ.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it will be in the intergovernmental cooperation section, but I think, Susan talked about the farmland north of the city, and I think we also have, an environmental conditions report that we did as part of our future urban development area study, so I think we have some really good mapping already that we can include that shows where that prime farmland is.
And also, we have, I guess from that intergovernmental agreement, there's only a certain amount of land which is, where Milton can propose to develop, right? There's, I don't know how much
It-
that is, but,
Could we get a briefing on the FUDA process and plan? I think that would be helpful, as
An update.
an update.
that's probably a good
Just to
idea.
remind everybody
Remind
about what
everyone.
we did, and, yeah.
Because I mean, I recognize that there's an inherent trade-off and potential conflict about the future vision of the city, which is, if we're gonna take more jobs and housing, and we're gonna protect farmland and a compact urban form, that means, right, you either have to say that we're gonna grow up, double entendre, right? We're gonna build bigger or infill, or we're just gonna sprawl, or we're gonna not take those jobs and housing, in which case somebody, where else do they go in the region, right? So there's that, yeah, okay.
I guess that's where a LEAF vision is the
Yeah.
starting point. we want the citizens who are living here, they want the quality of life. That comes first. And, you know, the public safety, quality of life, and the economic development is, I mean, that's important, but the quality of life is, you are here in Milton Hills because you like schools and the quality of life.
What's quality of life for existing and future residents?
Absolutely, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, you got pay for it. Can I ask another question?
Yes, well,
Sorry.
David has
David.
his hand up, and after David, go to you. Yes, David.
It's quality of life on one hand, but there's also quality of the environment on the other, and I don't see any of that in the goals here. I have, and there's no poetry certainly in it. Create a dynamic and attractive downtown environment that builds upon the historic core, as opposed to protect and enhance the historic downtown core of the community.
Well, the downtown is.
So I'm reading, the second one was what the goal is, right? Protect and enhance the historic downtown core of the community.
Well, and that
These are
one,
comprehensive plans, they're not poetry.
you have a map, a historic landmark map, and, you do have historic properties here. So you could tie some of your goals, or some of our goals to, you know, this location, with some poetry. I suppose, what does that mean? You know, what does that mean to us from an economic development standpoint?
And how do those places change what can happen around them? You know? You could all show wonderful examples of historic buildings in totally inappropriate context now that it's built up around them. Right, so, but I mean the poetry seriously, that there has to be something that talks about vision, but also quality of the environment.
Yeah, I guess quality of life and environment
Quality
sort
of
of
life
go
on one
together,
hand,
yes.
quality
Mhm.
of environment.
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, the second goal talks about environmental sustainability. But
You mean quality of the built environment, though,
Quality of the built environment.
Oh, okay.
as opposed to also the natural and
Right.
just that environment.
Wow, now we are talking, we are getting somewhere, Abby, now, so some really great input here, so.
Well, I
Yes,
mean,
Kurt.
and what David is hinting at is you can have good design and good economic development.
Right.
The economic development doesn't have to mean Walmart.
Right.
It can fit with good design. Recognizing that your design standards are gonna be different in an industrial park than in the historic downtown. Sorry?
I think he's talking about how the buildings relate to each other as you.
Mhm.
What about the
Talk about
airport?
context.
What about,
Yes, Jennifer, so airport.
what about, generate economic growth through the airport?
Have some objectives that.
Yeah, they're under the section about public infrastructure.
Yeah. That was gonna be my question, because one of the objectives here is support airport runway expansion. The other is proceed to acquire property adjacent to the airport to accommodate additional hangar development. And those, I was a little surprised to see that. I don't know to what extent the airport commission has kind of advanced that as that's their kind of decision that they've decided. That's what they've decided to go forward with. Cause it kind of looked like that was slipped in, and it's like, that may be a good policy, that might be a good goal. I just didn't know that we had kind of as a city decided that that's what we're gonna do.
We are going through the master plan process, and I
Of the-
guess
of the
that
airport.
would be premature to put it in here.
I'll take responsibility for, this is something we were editing today, and I agree that we should, be more deferential to the airport master plan, but the airport master plan is specifically surveying the needs, assessing the needs for the airport, and has identified, the potential for runway expansion, crosswind runway, more hangar development, but maybe we'll
Maybe-
rephrase it to.
Maybe rephrase it as, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, right? So continue to, that's an action item, is complete the airport master plan to assess the needs, to continue to make it a viable economic generator in the city without kind of pre-cooking the books that it's gonna be expansion or
I
not.
like that, that will be more honest, because it is in the process, and the
Right.
process is still going through, so.
Well, actually, in all honesty, that is what the airport commission is going to, I'm sure, be recommending. They just want to make sure the master.
Right, so we could
So-
express that language.
And frankly, I thought it was being more honest to actually
Okay.
identify it. But I think there's a way to, you're absolutely right that we should refer and rely on.
Reference the master planning process, and then ultimately, you know, once we see the master plan or the recommendation from the airport commission, yeah, we can sign off on it.
I completely
Ultimately,
agree.
it's council that would say, and I kinda like the specificity and objectives, where council says, it's our intention to expand the runway, rather than the kind of milquetoast objectives we get in a lot of comprehensive plans is continue to think about studying the possibility, right? I mean, so the
Well,
plan should also be what you intend to do. You could say, we intend to expand it. It doesn't mean that we're gonna do it
We
tomorrow.
don't know yet. I mean,
Right. Don't know.
you know,
That's-
So-
from the, all the data which I had seen, at a certain point, I think at that time, when I looked at 90% of the people who used the hangar, who used the airport, they didn't see any need for it. There were only small proportion,
But
Okay.
we're waiting for the airport
Yes.
commission to do their master planning process.
yes,
So
but they,
we're in the-
they're,
we're in
they're.
the process of doing.
Yeah, in
Mayor,
the process.
just so
Yeah.
you
Gonna be a
know, as an
little while.
update, the survey went to hundreds, if not 1,000 people today.
Oh,
The
okay.
second survey, the original survey was defective in that it focused on the people who currently use the airport.
Mhm.
So there's a more comprehensive survey that's underway now,
Oh, okay, I haven't seen that one, so
because
Would
it
I-
just went out.
would I get it too? I guess,
Will you get the survey, you mean?
yeah, I
Oh,
mean.
I can send it to.
Well, so, yeah, I would like to look at it, so.
Sure,
yeah.
happy to.
I guess what would be nice is if we knew what type of economic development generation some of these goals and objectives that they have in their plan would be generating, and then are there secondary impacts to the community that to be concerned about identifying other opportunities?
Because there'll be advantages, right?
Yep.
But there'll be disadvantages, more
Yeah.
noise, more flights,
Quality
more
of,
revenue probably.
quality
more-
of life and in the environment, so, you know, like David would say. So we got to look at the whole picture, not just, you know, one side of the equation. This is a small airport, but you know what happens close to the airport, so.
That is why it's also important in our land use plan and consistent with FAA airport zoning regulations that we're not, obviously, we're not gonna consider building any new housing near existing airports. And most of the land uses around there are compatible.
Yeah.
Actually, we have had some input already for a desire to have housing that specifically, like in Wanakee, where they have garage doors on the backs of the homes facing the runway. We actually have, you know, an air park, basically, a residential air park. There actually are people who.
Well, if people
advocate
wanna do that, then we should
Yeah.
consider that,
Yeah,
but
so, but as a rule of thumb, subdivisions next to airports are, as a rule of thumb, not a good idea.
but we have land uses that are
That's a
consistent with the
totally-
industrial
that's a
sort
totally
of.
different kind of airport.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yes.
That's, you know, a hobbyist airport.
Right.
Yeah.
So
This
we're
is-
not gonna have that.
We're not a hobbyist airport,
Yes,
general aviation.
But the one in Wanakee is.
yeah, this
One
is,
where they back up to the.
Yeah, but there's examples of airport, anyway, we're getting a little, or again. ahead of
yes,
ourselves
David, you
here.
have some more environment or
Facing some
quality or
headwinds on this discussion.
Jennifer,
We're facing some headwinds
How
on this
about,
discussion.
any more thoughts?
I guess I had some question about the housing piece that's in this chapter. I know we have a housing chapter. I'm wondering if it would help clarify why it's written in this chapter in terms of the economic development component.
It's a good
And the
idea.
reason I say that is because I don't think it's here to, I think it's here because we wanna tie jobs, we wanna try to tie housing to jobs, jobs to housing. So if there are goals that do that, that we need to identify in this chapter, not the housing chapter, I'm not sure I know what they are. and
Right.
So it's a little bit, it's okay that it's here, but it seems like it might be better to move it in the other chapter.
One could have a table too that lists the various goals, and then identify the chapters that addresses them. There might be, there likely is overlap, between various chapters. And for certain
Yeah, and I
others.
think what I was trying to get at with including housing in the economic development chapter is it's kind of the same reason why we call our housing task force workforce housing rather than affordable housing or income restricted housing, because we have identified a problem in Middleton, and the problem is that people who work here can't necessarily afford to live here. And we hear that time and time again, and it's the reason why only about 2,000 people, I think, in the data that you just sent me, only about 2,000 people both work and live in Middleton. So we also have a disconnect between, people who live here and where people work. So,
Say that.
right,
Right.
be more
And
explicit about it.
historically,
Mhm.
it's because the CDA, which really does economic development, had done some of the housing programs.
Early on, yes.
That's why it was, I'm sure Mike Davis's hand is on that writing.
Yep.
And why it was in the economic development chapter and then housing.
He wrote the
Yeah.
chapter in 2006, so that probably is why.
And, I mean, I like the phrase that a house is where a job goes to sleep at night, so I'm not sure we should use that, but that's what economic development officials are telling me around the state, that they have jobs open, but they can't get people to work because they can't get housing nearby.
And we hear that from a lot of the larger employers in the city too, especially like those that have service-oriented jobs like Marriott. They can't get people to come to work here because they can live cheaper on the east side of Madison, and they have job opportunities there, and the unemployment rate is low.
Well, they pay them so little. So, I mean, with that kind of a pay, it's hard to live here. Now, Abby, I have this page 13. You have point number 7. To utilize the 1-year extension of a TIF district allowed by the state in order to create affordable housing.
Yes.
So the state allows?
Yeah, for 1 year, when it comes time to close a TIF district, the city council could consider using some of the increment that's been generated over the life of the TIF to specifically for affordable housing, and it doesn't just have to be within the TIF district, it can be anywhere in the city. So Monona just did that. And didn't they have some opportunities for single-family ownership
Right.
as well? So it wasn't just rental housing, it wasn't just multifamily housing. And of course, we wouldn't be looking at all the proceeds of TIF 3, because there's no way we could.
No,
We'll
it's,
be
it's,
talking
you
about,
keep it open for another year.
For another year, right.
And the increment for that year goes into a fund, and it can be used for revolving loan funds for housing. And, I can send you a memo that I did
In
from
our
Monona
case-
on how they did it.
In our case, you're talking about $30-40 million, right?
No, the increment for 1 year.
For 1 year.
So that will be still 15 to 20, well, right now
have
it's
to
about 8 or 9.
Well, that's how Madison is funding, Jen was talking about a presentation today, from her friends in,
Wisconsin.
at the APA conference, how they do it in Madison, and that's how they fund it, is through their TID extensions.
Oh, okay.
About 20 cities statewide have done it, so. I can send anyone interested a memo on how they did it in Monona, cause
I need a,
We-
if it's one page, yes. If
it's no, I wrote it, so it's not a one-page memo, it's more like 12 to 15.
Okay, cut it out and send me the relevant ones.
I also have a presentation that Kurt
Yes.
Watinsky from the league put together on the 1 year extension, and I can send that out to you too if you're interested.
That'd be better.
Short is,
I like including that here.
so, well,
Yeah.
no, that's a great thing. I didn't know that you could do that, so, I mean. yeah.
Again, I think talking about the benefits, across diverse income levels and different things in this chapter would be a really good idea to, if we're including the housing component, we're trying to understand the types of economic development opportunities, and that, there would be some opportunity to, hopefully, get some of the jobs in our community that maybe aren't here, or, just kind of expand the economic opportunities at different levels.
Yeah, well, one would wonder by 2030 if there will be any land other than the infill for development. You're talking about 12 years, 11 years.
Well, I mean, you make a plan and a forecast based on your best guess of the most likely and most desirable future, but Well, you update it every 5 or 10 years,
Yep,
because
yep,
we don't know what flying cars are gonna do, or
Or no cars.
teleportation, we don't even know.
well, they're
I mean,
coming.
10 years ago, when we wrote the first report, there was no iPhone, so.
Yes.
Did you ever think about that? Our first the plan in 2006, there was no iPhone.
Yeah, that's
Now you
actually,
can't imagine living without one, so.
so I like that vision, innovation, and also somehow, the way the digital economy is changing the whole thing, and looking at that, it's very difficult to predict or project what it will be in 10 years.
We don't know what's gonna happen to retail,
Yes.
if there'll be any demand for retail at all,
Yes.
or, if, I mean, we've already had that with downtown, there's more demand for restaurants than retail.
In our house, my wife is using Amazon more and more than, and I don't. And both my kids, Amazon, so I'm still I don't know if I have ordered anything from Amazon yet, so,
I was, on
it's a
Saturday
river,
morning,
I know.
It's a river.
There is one, right?
on Saturday morning, I spoke to a group, along with a couple of other solar folks about public and private uses of renewable energy. And they talked about how, 10 years ago, people were still saying, we can't afford to put solar on our building, it's cost prohibitive. And it was like early adopters who were doing it, and now solar and wind are cheaper than coal. So the cost has come down so significantly, and that's an example of something we wouldn't have predicted in 2006 when we initially did our comp plan.
Innovation.
Great to have solar panels in every roof in this whole city.
I
Well,
have
in
a
Eau Claire's, Eau Claire's comp plan,
Oh,
this is a
yes,
little off.
David.
If we've
Oh,
got a
sorry.
plug-in for Amazon, I trust everybody is using Amazon Smile, not just Amazon.
Why, does the Middleton Library have a,
That Middleton Library gets a percentage return on all sales.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Indeed.
it's pretty hefty too.
You log on, instead of Amazon, you log on to Amazon Smile, or smile.amazon.
Well, then I might look into it, so,
And we, some of the money that we use
that will come to the
comes
library?
to the library.
Wow.
Isn't it like 0.5%?
Yeah.
It's a pretty decent amount of money. I mean,
It's a small percentage, but there's a lot of sales.
yeah, it is, yep.
Yes, folks, more questions?
Oh, I was just gonna mention one more thing, because we were talking about solar, and Kurt said it would be great to have solar on every rooftop. One of the things that Eau Claire has in their comprehensive plan is a solar analysis, so it looks at the capacity of the buildings that they have in their community and what kind of solar that the buildings could support. I don't think we can do anything like this in-house, but eventually I would love to have some sort of mapping that would identify, the larger rooftops in the city and whether or not they currently have solar, and what the capacity might be for some of the rooftops that don't have solar, especially given now that we have this 100% renewable goal.
Well, there is Google Solar.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can just
Yep.
look up your house and see the solar potential.
Yep,
It is
yep.
amazing, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, it's simply incredible. You would have never thought 7 years ago, 10 years ago. Now you have it.
I mean, I do wonder if we want to put in as an objective, we already have it with TIF to kind of pay for those, but would the city or the CDA be interested in, like, some sort of revolving loan fund for businesses, maybe not in TIDS, that could get low-cost financing for solar or other energy improvements? Because for businesses, that reduces their costs, that helps economic development.
Needs
Well, they
someone-
also
I don't
have
know if they can
access
get
to PACE financing
PACE
potentially
financing.
too.
Yeah, so now,
Medic has programs, and
now we are talking, so I think now it's getting somewhere, so. Yes. Jennifer is thinking now. Jennifer is thinking, coming up some new ideas. David? Dan?
Kurt, do you know of any communities that do that? Through their CDA, have a revolving loan fund for solar?
solar, I could look.
Send
I
them
mean, a
our
lot
way.
of cities have revolving loan funds through CDAs
Yeah,
for
Our
business
C-
development.
Our CDA doesn't have a whole lot of money, so. so.
No, but we have a revolving loan fund that we're in the process of trying to convert,
Yep, yep.
and we would like to use the proceeds, at least staff would like to use the proceeds to put solar on city buildings.
Well, even if no one's done it, we could do it.
That's
Why not be
right.
the first?
Innovation, want to be the first, the pioneer. Well, any more question, or you guys have got enough input, Mark and Abby?
Got a few ideas. I'm gonna look up Amazon Smile on that one. From the early adopters.
Okay, well, then I need a motion to adjourn.
So motion to adjourn.
All right, need a second, so we are adjourned. Thank you for all your input.